Then I'll give some introduction to the webinar for the people who's not been on the Zoom webinar. So Gunther is one of the leading people in Europe. He's calling himself an independent Scrum Caretaker, taking care of Scrum and how Scrum is understood across both Europe and the rest of the world. I'm very happy to have you here. Gunther has been a keynote speaker at the Scrum Days Denmark conference since 2014.
Yeah, since the ever first edition.
Yes. Yeah.
I've been at every single one of them. Yeah.
Yes, that's amazing. And so exactly is supposed to be here a couple of weeks ago. We're going to use the Zoom webinar, and the Zoom webinar have this Q&A functionality where you can post questions. We'll do a short Q&A after Gunther's presentation, but he also asked if some questions, if they were relevant for the topic he's covering, then I can interrupt him and we can dive into the question. In the Q&A module,
yes,
you can
because otherwise it's such like the old waterfall thing, right? First you do the work and then you can ask questions, where we're like iterative incremental people, we do it all the time, right? Short feedback.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. So please ask questions during the presentation, and also use the upvote functionality, so you can vote on other questions and they will go on the top of the Q&A backlog, so to speak. We're almost 100 people now, so welcome, Gunther.
Thank you, Mads, and welcome everybody in the call. So a little bit of a different setting, and in a way, it's a pleasure to be here. Although I would have loved to be sort of live in Copenhagen, and I think where was the second one, Aarhus? Yes. So there was going to be 2 Scrum Days Denmark this year, but you know, next year probably.
Yes, in Copenhagen and Aarhus.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know how to pronounce it. I'll just say Aarhus.
That's good enough.
Okay. Cool. So hello everybody. Thanks for being here. So the advantage of this is that the disadvantage, it's not live. The advantage is that we have people from all over the world attending several of my webinars. I've done a lot of them. That's another advantage, that suddenly you get asked to go to speak at webinars. You don't have to travel, no visa, no hotel arrangements and so on. So that's probably a good thing. And then we have a tool like this, like Zoom, to talk about things. So like Mads says, I need to call myself an independent Scrum Caretaker. I must say the independent thing I added to it afterwards to make clear that it's sort of independence. Meaning, I don't consider myself as sort of a subordinate of any type of organization. Not small, not big, whatever. I've worked with enough of them. I decided a few years ago to now go totally my own way, which is very typical in my life to always choose the difficult path. I don't know why I do that to myself. Anyhow, the lovely thing is also the expression, let's say, of my independence. I felt the first real expression of that was actually a book I recently published. I don't know if anybody's seen it. So 97 Things Every Scrum Practitioner Should Know, by 68 authors. You see them all over here. And they come from all over the place, all over the world, not limited to a certain type of organization, whatever. You've got trainers, non-trainers, Scrum Org people, Scrum Alliance people, less people, whatever. So that was sort of really, really happy. And the topic was actually Scrum. We call it Scrum Practitioner. But I'm sort of trying to get over this whole overly role-oriented approach of Scrum. For me, it's about Scrum. That's why I call myself a Scrum Caretaker. And Caretaker, for me, also resonates the interest and the sort of empathy towards the fact that it's all about people. So I wanted to talk with you guys today about engagement. And I last year at Scrum Days Denmark, that was in the fall, I already talked about engagement being key. And then afterwards, shortly afterwards, actually I started making it a little bit stronger, and I hope you can see my screen. And I started calling it engagement is the key. So not just engagement is key, engagement is the key. So, and maybe for the people that were already at Scrum Days Denmark last year, I'll take it a step further. And I'm not going to say the same things again. So, okay, please stay. We got more than 100 people, so that's cool. Now, in order to help us be a little bit more interactive too, I've prepared some things at Mentimeter, and I'll share that with you guys first. So my topic is about engagement is the key. So, and how did I come up with this topic? A few years ago, about 2 years ago, company in the Netherlands producing some Agile magazine, very fancy, glossy magazine. They asked me to contribute with an article about performance. So performance in the world of Scrum, you know, performance reviews, assessments, whatever, salary discussions and all those things, and performance in general. And I like this Scrum guy, so I'm just into Scrum. So I thought about performance in an environment of Scrum where Scrum is being used. And that it helped me build on a lot of things that I've done in the past. But let me first go into the topic of performance with you guys first, and then go into that Mentimeter stuff. It will pretty soon be clear what it's about. Always picking the wrong screen, it seems. I'm sort of hoping that you see the right screen I'm showing you guys. Oh, there's a heart coming in, so that's cool. So I hope you're seeing my the same title screen. Okay, cool. So that's a Mentimeter. You'll see on top of the screen that there's a website, menti.com, and there's a code you can use, 917832. And you can enter the, let's say, the competition. It's not really a competition, so thank you for that. So talking about performance, so I have a first question for you guys, and we'll see how long it takes. In your organization, your current work situation, the organization that you work for or that you work with, if you're a consultant, have a look. Okay. In the organization that you work, what are people currently measuring? What are the metrics or the KPIs or the objectives or whatever that people are using in terms of performance in general? Yeah. So I'm going to open up the voting. So please take a little bit of time. Go to the menti.com, use that code, and just enter a number of things that you think, oh yeah, this is what people are actually measuring. Sometimes it's a dream come true, and the first word that comes up is what you were hoping for. So what sort of KPIs, metrics, measurements do people have to sort of measure or track or assess whatever performance in your organization? So velocity or number of story points, burn downs, number of feature completion, even the sprint goals, which is cool. Predictability. Sometimes predictability is also in terms of, did you achieve your forecast that you made by the beginning of the sprint? Still thinking it's a commitment. Number of stories or stories done. Signed things, OKRs. Yeah, so sort of the almost new name for KPIs, honestly. Unless you use them properly, but that's something you can say about KPIs too. Okay, so we've got over 50 people voting for this. Cycle time, time to market. Beautiful things, thank you. Even business value, it's not a bad idea probably. Cycle times, number of hours work done. Okay. So I'll give you 10 more seconds to enter some keywords. Okay, here we go. Thank you. That's 63 people participating. Really, thank you for that. At the heart seems to be velocity, time to market, really number of stories, predictability, satisfaction, completion. Okay, cool. Give me some sort of great idea. Okay, so we go back to the presentation. So thank you for that. So that was the first question. What does your organization monitor and measure in terms of performance? I was thinking about performance in a world or an environment, the context of Scrum. And in the last paper I wrote, I've been working on my sort of simple definition of Scrum. So I'm always looking for the simplest definition of Scrum possible. I used to use the phrase a lot, a simple framework for complex product development, a simple framework to address complex challenges. This is sort of the new one. It's sort of based on that latest paper I've got out. That paper is called Moving Your Scrum Downfield. So everybody knows in general Scrum is from a situation in rugby. In our world, it means, for me, it means a simple framework that enables people to derive value from complex challenges. So it's a little bit more difficult, but it's for me better in the sense that it also adds something of a goal to Scrum. Why are we doing Scrum? Because we want to derive value. So it's a simple framework for complex challenges. That's one thing. And it's about deriving value from complex problems and complex challenges. So it's all about value. So I was like, if you want to measure anything with regards to Scrum, it should be revolving around value, right? So, and that always comes back to things that I've been working on. So Mads certainly knows that, and other people probably. So from 2013 until 2016, I worked with Ken Schwaber and Scrum the Talk in lots of things. But one of the things that Ken and I did is we created something, we assembled something from our collected experience, let's say, that we called Agility Path. It was a framework to help organizations go through an agile transformation in an agile way. Sort of introducing Scrum by using Scrum already. Hoping that people would see that you can't introduce Scrum or become more agile in sort of by using ancient recipes, industrial recipes. And one of the ambitions we had is to help managers, stakeholders, whatever, let's call them in general managers for right now, shift their focus away from teams and into or onto the impact that the work of the teams had. So rather than looking at how are the teams working, looking at what is the impact that we are getting from the work that we are doing in terms of value or at least valuable outcomes. How valuable are the outcomes that are being produced? And value is something very different than volume. You would have seen in the word cloud just before that, I think a lot of metrics are still about volume. Velocity in itself is already about volume at the sprint scale, but then living up to your forecast, features delivered and so on, that's all about volume. That's something very different from value. Now we graciously failed in getting that framework to be known over the world, so we stopped it a little bit and we turned it part of it into what is nowadays called evidence-based management. And I'll come back on that. But the main focus was, rather than looking at sort of the engine of the car, look at where is the car heading for, and is the road clear, and is it very clear? Are we driving in the right direction? And we felt, and I still strongly feel about it, that should be the role of managers, stakeholders, CXOs, whatever, executive people and so on. Looking at direction, are we following the right strategies? Is the road clear? Instead of being overly focused on sort of the performance of the engine. Now, that was the ambition. Now, that might be reflected in the idea, to bring it back to Scrum. Everybody knows the sprint review, right? The event by the end of a sprint. And the focus, the inspection that we do at the sprint review is still way too much about the phrase you see on the bottom of the screen, that did everybody in this team, every individual, perform his or her work? Did you not go over your estimates, and did you all perform your tasks? I'm like, wow, that's not sort of the idea of a sprint review. That's not even the idea of Scrum. From an external perspective, meaning beyond the Scrum team, stakeholders, managers, and so on, and it's also in that paper I just wrote, Moving Your Scrum Downfield. From an external perspective, the minimal units in terms of Scrum are a sprint as a unit of time, a team as unit of people, and value as a unit of measurement, let's say. And not individuals or tasks and estimates, so time in individuals, and how much work did you do, and did you not go over your estimates? It's not the idea. So you want to have that management shift from looking at performance and delivery and volume towards value, by understanding that sprint reviews should be about how much value or potential value has the team, or have the multiple teams, if you work with multiple teams on the same product, how much value have they potentially created in a sprint? So it's about sprint team value. And that's a very, very different conversation, because it's about outcome, it's about impact, it's not about judgment, assessments, blaming people, chopping people's head off, and so on. So that's sort of the shift that we're looking for. And you are on the way towards at least making that shift, if your sprint reviews are not about just the past, judgments, assessments, evaluations, justifications, and so on, utilization, all those things about value. People respecting that in a complex adaptive system, which a team or multiple teams is, you can't deduce certain results to individual performance. It's performance as a team. So that's the ambition. It still is the ambition. And I feel more and more companies are moving towards that. So that's really nice. Now, if you want to help companies move towards that, we need to help them a little bit. So can you now share, in terms of performance, but then performance in terms of value, if the goal of Scrum is to produce more value, and we want to get managers to feel invited, what would you measure? What would you monitor in order to know that you're using Scrum to optimize for value or delivering more value? So, and I think the voting should be open. So what would you monitor and measure to know that you are optimizing for value? So thanks. Customer satisfaction, your North Star behavior. Can it be used? Is it actually usable? Happiness, customer satisfaction, customer happiness, behavior benefits, business value. Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you. So at heart, still seems to be a lot of people seem to be convinced that it's about customer satisfaction. Yeah, customer usage, cost savings, NPS, maybe as a way to collect customer satisfaction things. Yeah, achieving goals, the sprint goal. Did we achieve the sprint goal? Yeah. Cool. Well-beings of team members, realized value. We have a pretty steady thing called customer satisfaction, it seems. Earnings, results, requirements fulfilled. Just following up a little bit. Oh, cool. Thank you.
And still remember to ask questions in the Q&A module if you have a question to Gunther.
Yeah.
And who should actually help monitoring this? What do you think, Gunther?
Well, I believe that, like we just said, if a sprint review should be about the topic of how much potential value has a team created in a sprint. So this is, I don't know who should do that, but probably the people at the sprint review, meaning Scrum team, or at least product owner, development team, and all right stakeholders, thinking about the work that has been produced. Look at that work in terms of how much value or potential value is in that. And I make, just for everybody's understanding, I add potential to that, because value is obviously a huge assumption, as long as you don't go to market and you actually release stuff. So if you have in a sprint produced a releasable increment, it means you have created potential value. You don't know yet. If you're looking at the sprint review as at an increment or increments that have already been released, you might actually be looking at, did it actually create or generate the value that we were hoping for? So thanks very much. Product KPIs, customer feedback, a lot of things. Great, very recognizable. Let me have a look again at. So thank you for sharing that. By the way, I will include those results in the presentation afterwards. I will share it down with Mads, so we can share it with you guys. So thanks very much. But at least it's very important to make this idea of value tangible, almost actionable. What do you mean with value? So also we felt very much needed when we created the agility path. So the goal of agility path, like I just showed you, is to get people, managers and so on, away from sort of breathing down developers' necks and look at impact and value and outcomes, and not just volume. Now, in order to do that, we wanted to help them too, and that's we call that, you know, the idea of key performance indicators. So we turn that into key value indicators, indicators about value, possible indicators that will help you think this through. So, and we've identified a number of them. Now, I'm going to be honest, I think in the official evidence-based management framework by Scrum, they've added a fourth value area. I'm still sort of sticking to the three ones. So thinking in terms of key value indicators, what is value? The highest level, something with actual value. And at least sort of three domains for that. Something with money in general, because most of us work for probably commercial companies, for profit companies. They want to make a profit. They want a financial return, might be cost cutting, like somebody indicated. Something money, benefits, profits, cost cutting, maybe market share. Something with customer satisfaction, usage maybe of the product, customer satisfaction of the product, and something with team engagement. And I'll come back on that. And the two other domains are what I like to call adaptability. So you can have a sort of high value, high customer satisfaction, making lots of money, happy teams, engaged teams, whatever. But are you also able to sustain that value? That's what I call adaptability. Sort of even a reflection of agility, meaning what is your release cadence? How often can you go to market? What's your undone time? And hopefully as short as possible, and ideally zero. Undone time meaning how much time do you still have to spend on an increment after it has been produced by the Scrum team or the development team, meaning work done by other people, other departments. We want to reduce that to zero. Lead cycle time and so on, unfocused time. So how much is your focus on getting things done within a sprint sort of in danger by having to go to different meetings and other things? Yeah? So a number of possible indicators that will help you keep an eye on your ability to sustain your value. Yeah? And the last one is innovation, meaning you can have a high value, a high ability to sustain that value, but are you also keeping an eye open on potential new forms of value and new sources of value and new markets, maybe new products even? That's what I call innovation. Now, focusing at the primary domain, the primary value area called value in my schedule, I believe that we should produce valuable outcomes for the organization, often expressed in money, via the stakeholders, so they're there to help us in that. We should be producing valuable outcomes. We should produce stuff that is perceived as valuable for our customer or a consumer or our user base. And how you measure that customer satisfaction, NPS or other ways, that's totally up to you guys.
So Gunther, we have some questions.
Yes.
And one of them is more about the understanding from some of the key value indicators. One from Thomas here is undone time. Could you elaborate, please?
Oh yeah, so undone time is, so the idea is to keep track of a number of parameters, sort of variables, and undone time is what I call the time you still have to spend. So by the end of the sprint, ideally you have what we call a done increment. Done should reflect releasable. Now in a lot of organizations, it doesn't do that. Done is sort of not really done, but as done as far as we can get. So undone time is the time measured that it takes to go from a done increment up to the point that it's actually being released or in a truly releasable state. Meaning there's maybe some QA work that still needs to happen, integration work, regression testing, whatever, things that need to be done after a team has delivered it as done. And then you want to reduce your undone time actually to 0. And think of it in terms like the higher your undone time, the lower actually your agility is, your ability to release, learn, inspect, and so on. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's just, those are actually samples, suggestions. Think about it. Think about how do you translate, how would you define value in your organization, your context for your product, with your people, and so on. So think about it. But just value in itself is just a general word. So think about it. What are you going to measure in order to know that you are actually delivering value? And the highest domain is for me value itself.
And there's a question here. I might guess your answer, but let's have it anyway because it's related to how to identify value. So we have one for Daniel. How can a company identify what value is for them? Any tools to help a company doing this?
Yeah, well, at the highest level, in general, value can be expressed. So the idea that you're producing valuable outcomes is expressed by something with money, financial returns, return on investment, benefits, profits, maybe even in a reverse case, sort of cost cutting that you're realizing. So something with value. So if you're producing increments that increase benefits, profits, some sort of financial satisfaction, that might be seen as a valuable outcome. Another valuable outcome is for the people, so that's for the people that are like funding, sponsoring your development, your initiative, your product, the organization and the stakeholders. Value is obviously also for customers and users and consumers. And that already indicates that value is rarely one parameter. It's generally a collection of parameters. It's a collection of metrics or indicators. So value is almost impossible to just plainly translate into one thing only. So that makes it rather complex, but that is actually like, that's it. That's complexity. And what I think is very important also, and I believe that is the most underestimated aspect of valuable outcomes, the fact that we move to Scrum, we transform to Scrum, should result in more value, meaning more financial things, returns in some way, higher customer satisfaction, to put it that simply, but it should also help the teams. So it's for the people that sponsor us, it's for the people that use our products, but it should also be valuable for the people that produce the work, that do the work, that produce those outcomes. So that's team engagement. So, and that's, let's focus on those three first. And is that, by the way, helpful? Do you see that in the questions? So value, at least at the highest level, is something with money, something with customer satisfaction, and something with, let's say, team satisfaction, happiness. I'm not too happy with those terms, so something with team engagement.
Yeah. There's something about, there's a question here that got upvoted from a number of people related to team and team composition. So team of specialists versus feature team, would performance metrics be different for the two? This is a question from Klaus.
Yeah, well, one of the goals is once you have metrics or indicators like this in place, you should be able, in a way, at some point in time, see the result in your ability to create value depending on certain team compositions. And let me mainly talk about dedicated teams. It should be clear in indicators that if you have dedicated, stable teams, long-lived teams, our assumption is that your ability to produce value is a lot higher, because there's no context switching, like the unfocused time aspect. There's no context switching, no task switching. It's sort of minimal stability that will help you to produce more value. So that things that we would hope that would become apparent once you start measuring your ability to deliver value. So that's one of the aspects. So this is about not looking at the engine or the composition of the engine, looking at the impact. And then I'll come back on that. Then from measuring, assessing your impact, then looking back at how are you working? How's the engine working? I'll come back on that aspect. Yeah, but at least value means for me at the highest level, value for the people sponsoring us, the people using our work, but also the people that have to do the work. So, and that's team engagement. Now, like I just said, it's all about inspection. Key value indicators is about inspecting your ability to deliver value, inspecting sort of the outcomes or your possible impact that you're having towards the organization, towards your team, towards your consumer base. Now, like I said a while ago, inspection without adaptation is pointless in Scrum. It's even an act of futility, meaning just at the sprint review, looking at value, maybe looking at the current state of those, the current value of those indicators and metrics, without trying to learn, trying to adapt upon that and embrace reality and do something with it, that's pointless. Nothing in Scrum was designed to just look at the past. So looking at the past, it's a huge improvement if you move away from volume and productivity and velocity and so on towards value. But even if you're doing that, that's still not enough. You have to take it a step further. So, and that's why you need to close the loops. So Scrum is full of feedback loops. Sprint is a feedback loop in itself. So at the sprint review, you want to have an idea about what is needed, what can we do to potentially increase our ability to deliver value in the next sprint or the next couple of sprints. Meaning, rather than focusing on the way Scrum is being performed, focus at the outcome of your system of Scrum, value, and use that to look back at what can we do to help the teams, facilitate the teams so that they can create more value in the next sprint or sprints. And that might come up with team composition. You might have missing skills. You might have people intervening in the team composition way too often. And that will decrease your ability to deliver value. You might find that people need to go on trainings or other ways of learning. You might find that people don't have the right tools, they don't have the right authorizations and so on. So measuring your ability to deliver value is only step one, and it's just the start of it. It has no purpose. It's not useful if you don't do something with it. And again, at the same level, sprints, teams, and value, what can we do? Rather than ending a sprint review or entering next sprint by saying, we want you to deliver a certain amount of the forecast that you promised us in the next sprint, which is again all about value. We want everybody to live up to their estimates and so on. So inspect value and then look at the way the Scrum teams are working to help them do better. Tools, authorizations, facilitate them, allow them to not be interrupted during the sprint, don't interrupt them yourselves and so on. So it's sort of closing the loop. It's building a sort of inspect loop on top of the sprints that your teams are doing, a virtual loop, by inspecting your ability to deliver value, the impact that you're having, and then trying to look for ways and tools and means to actually increase that ability. Now, at the highest level, I've described 3 indicators of value, something with money, something with users, and something with team engagement. So imagine you would try to get this idea across with your management, or maybe people are already doing that. So let's go back to our Mentimeter stuff. Going back to that, from those 3 primary KVIs, key value indicators, what would you expect, or what are typically, which one of them are typically been given the highest priority? So financial returns, customer satisfaction, team engagement. By the way, from the word cloud, it seemed it was very much about customer satisfaction. But hey, I'm not going to buy sugar. So if you would introduce this idea of value in your organization, and you would take the liberty to say, hey, value in terms of possibly those 3 parameters, what do you think people would see as, oh yeah, this is by far the most important?
And maybe while people are using the Mentimeter, there's a question here.
Mm-hmm.
If the team is not a software team, would you still use these key value indicators? I think it was before showing this this Mentimeter, but what about for non-software teams?
Yes, you would still have to think about, so Scrum, the definition of Scrum I shared is not limited to software only. That's also why one of the reasons why I created that paper, moving your Scrum downfield, to sort of move away from the exact rules of Scrum a little bit, because they're very software and product oriented. Valuable outcomes for your product. Don't see product as too narrow, too limited. A product can be a physical product, can be a digital product. It's not a product traditionally, it can be a service. So I've worked with people in youth care, government and so on. So think about taking a sort of definition of what is product and what is a valuable outcome for our product. And that might be a digital, a physical, it might be a product, it might be a service. So think about what is valuable outcomes. And this might be something with customer or user satisfaction, I think is always going to be there, something with team engagement. And in a commercial environment, something with money probably also is. And if it's not about money, it might be a benefit to, I don't know, to society, another form of not financial, but as a sort of benefit to maybe your shareholders or your stakeholders. Yeah, that's why I say it's sort of samples, it's examples of things, but I think the underlying message, I think is pretty generic. Helpful, Matt?
Yeah, and I agree. I actually work also with companies not producing software, not having software developers, not having people doing technical software development.
And I think even in a non-software context, I think they will more easily grasp the idea of value rather than volume. Because you know what, features, velocity and so on are very typical software. So sort of the shift that we have to make in the software world might be bigger than in the non-software world. Okay, so thank you. I think it's clear we have a winner. In our most organizations, you guys are saying that, oh, it would mostly be about money, probably also about customer satisfaction, and who knows, also a little bit about team engagement. Now, let me share my view on that. My view actually is the fact that team engagement or engagement in general has the most room for improvement. So we can focus on money, we can focus on customer satisfaction and give team engagement the lowest priority. I think it should be the other way around. And I'll explain why. Not just turn it the other way around, but make team engagement the focus that you have to look for. Why? When I looked up those things a few years ago about performance, I remembered for myself, oh yeah, my God, there's this institute in the US, the Gallup Institute, and every couple of years they produce a report based upon surveys across the world, and it's called the State of the Global Workplace. Now, the latest version of that report was from 2017, and it incorporated data and survey results from 2014 until 2016. Now, over all of the years, by the way, those figures have been rather stable. They have been improving slightly, but not hugely. And what is so scary about it is that at the world level, so at the global scale, they've been asking people about this sort of engagement. How engaged do you feel in and for your company? And it seems that across the world, from the workforce, only 15% says, yeah, we're really engaged. We believe in our company. We believe in the purpose in our company. We're willing to go the extra mile. We'll work hard. We'll do everything we can for our company. And you've got about 67%, as you see, people that are like, yeah, well, you know what, sort of couldn't care less. As long as I get my salary by the end of the month, I will certainly not do something special, whatever. So very, very passive, which is sort of scary because that's a majority of the workforce saying, well, you know what, I don't really care. And that is scary. You know the situation maybe, I don't know how that works in your organizations. In some large organizations in Belgium and in the Netherlands, they used to have like those little gates that you have to pass in the morning where you have to put your badge on and then you were registered as a present. It's like sort of all day long spending time on your desk, on your chair, sitting, watching your watch, regularly hoping that you can leave through those same gates again as quickly as possible and go home and do something that you really love. And that's a bit of a pity because, you know, we spend so much time at work. Wouldn't life be a lot better and wouldn't we be a lot happier if we could do something that we truly believe in and not have to wait until the weekend or in the evenings go home to do that? But more scary is that at the global scale, 18% of the workforce say that they're actually actively disengaged, meaning negatively engaged. It's sort of undoing the positive work of those 15%, which is even more scary. So they're not just working for the company, not just sitting still, but almost actively sometimes working against the company, working against their colleagues, working against management, sort of undermining or a sort of sabotage. That is even more scary. Now, yes.
Maybe this question, how do you think the remote work currently affects employee engagement in general? Now we have people working from home and not being together and collaborating in the same way. So Henning is asking this question.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure how it's going to work out. First of all, I'm doing a lot of things sort of online too, although I've just eliminated a lot of things that I had to do. So I have a lot of more time available to do like valuable stuff rather than sitting in meetings. There's a fascinating article in my book, 97 Things Every Scrum Practitioner Should Know. Let me quickly pick that up. I've got it lying around here somewhere, I believe. It's from an American Scrum trainer, not from Scrum at all, but from the Scrum Alliance. He's called Daniel James Gull, and he's written an article for my book, so it's got 97 articles, and it's called The Effects of Working from Home. Now, that article was written long before the Corona crisis, by the end of last year. Daniel has been doing investigation research. He's working on a PhD, I believe, in some social things. And he described the effects of working from home. And that is not too positive, actually. So let me pick out a couple of things. And I hope that makes it clear, because I truly feel the same way. When a worker is working from home with limited access to or contact with co-workers, a distorted sense of normal can emerge. Workers lack the immediate non-verbal feedback through body language that signals cultural norms. Working from home reduces the number of opportunities for team members to earn the respect and trust of their colleagues through interactions with other individuals. The virtual dynamic does not have the same effect. So this is the effect of working from home at least on a team. Now, team challenge is less, team cohesion is a lot less. There's examples from that. So maybe for a traditional office work, it's going to work out fine to do stuff at home. If it's really about teams and engaging as a teams with each other, interacting, collaborating, asking questions, figuring out difficult questions and complex situations together as a team, working from home as these sort of distributed ways of non-collocated work is not really going to help. Daniel continues to say that without direct face-to-face interactions, teams are not able to effectively move through the stages of group development. I don't know if anybody knows that, Tuckman, so forming, storming, norming, performing. Because he says, and that's the conclusion of his article, there simply are not enough opportunities for cooperation and conflict available for a team to grow to a state of high performance. So I'm sort of thinking, so there's a lot of additional advantages of working from home remotely that are being uncovered and unveiled by now. So that's cool. But it's not going to work for highly complex situations and where focus is a lot of teamwork, producing results, increasing value as a team. It's going to require, because we are social creatures, we are human beings. We live, we prosper, we thrive on interaction, connection with people, being affirmed by people, being confirmed in, oh, you're good at this, you're good at that, we can learn from each other. And a lot of those sort of human development aspects will be highly reduced with too much remote work. So we'll see how that works out. But I think the impact on team engagement is going to be, can be quite high. And I compare it a lot to, it's not in the presentation anymore, to open office work. You know, everybody, I know how many of you are working in open offices, so open landscapes. That is not really great for teamwork and for team engagement, because it means I'm working with my headphones on. I want to ask a colleague of mine who's 2 seats away from me I want to ask something, and I'll send him a text message, or even worse, an email, which is terrible. It creates delays, waste, and it sort of makes us disconnected from each other. So disconnectedness is a huge problem if you have to solve difficult things together as a team. So open offices and remote work, great for certain types of work, maybe not too brilliant for really teamwork. And as always, maybe people will look for a balance. Yeah?
So I see people are asking for the where to find this, and this is part of your new book.
Yes, yes. So that's
not an article, a blog, or you can actually.
Yeah. It's an article from the new book. The new book is called 97 Things Every Scrum Practitioner Should Know, and that's one of the articles in the book. It's an article in the book, so I have the 97 things, articles, and I've grouped them according to 10 themes. And one of the groupings is about people all too human. So our human aspects, with aspects like working from home. I've got a great guy from the Netherlands who's written a couple of anthropological things about how it is to work together with humans. And as you all know, I'm pretty fierce in saying that we are people, we are not resources. We are not robots, we are not programmable entities, we are not pieces of machinery. We are human beings. And that means human beings need it even for our own self-confirmation and our self-esteem. We need to be able to connect with people, possibly go into a form of conflict with other people. That's what we need to do, figure out things together, hold ideas against each other and figure out that all together. So we're not made for total isolated ways of working. So be careful. And I think that what we're going through right now with the crisis, it's good because we are discovering that for a number of things, remote working actually is an alternative. Let's hope that helps us reduce traveling a lot, certainly via planes, and then help the climate a little bit. but it's not going to solve everything. For a number of things, we want to be able to really actually connect with other people. Yeah. Okay. So, and now to go back to the engagement, I believe engagement is really important, and remote working is not always going to help us increase our levels of engagement. So at a global scale, 15% engaged, 67% a little bit highly passive, and 18% disengaged. In Western Europe, we seem to be scoring even lower than that. And Denmark, as Belgium, is part of Western Europe. Now in Denmark, you're doing quite fine. So that's cool. So a lot of people in Denmark, it seems that you're at least way beyond the Western European average of 10%. You're at 16%, which is even 1% higher than the global average. But still, imagine a company of 1,000 people and only 160 people employed by that company, paid for by that company, are really saying, yeah, this is a company I believe in. I will do that extra thing to help the company. And 73%, meaning out of 1,000 people, careless. So you see, there's a lot of room for improvement. Now in Belgium, just to make you a little bit better, at least in Denmark, we're sort of at the level of the Western European averages, which is really, really bad. But imagine that we can uplift that number of Denmark 16%, 10% in Belgium. We can uplift that to 20%, 25, 30, 40% out of 1,000 people engaged like 100, 200 people more than only the 160 people that are actively engaged. Imagine that would be possible. Now, engagement obviously is strongly connected. It's almost like an equivalent to what we call in Scrum commitment. So commitment is one of the Scrum values. It's quite an important one. It also relates a lot to what I like to call intrinsic motivation. That's sort of engagement. It's sort of from you. It's something you give for the company. It's something you invest in the company. Now, just to highlight the idea of commitment again in Scrum. So it's an important value in Scrum. It is an important value in Scrum because it's a lot. It has to do with the dedication of people. It's what people do, how they do, the drive that they show, the motivation that they show. It is not about an end result. And that was a problem in the past where we used commitment for a sprint at the end of sprint planning, where people thought, yeah, commitment means that whatever happens, this is what you will do. No, commitment meant we're going to work really hard. If it's working out, fine, we'll keep you posted. If it's not working out, we'll keep you posted too. That is a high form of commitment. I like the analogy a lot with a sports team. Right? And it's part of the slide where a trainer from a team could say, well, you know what, we lost the game, but I cannot fault my players for their commitment. They worked hard, they tried everything, they adapted, they looked for different strategies, but still we lost the game. But it was not because of our commitment. And that's what commitment is about, dedication. It's about the effort that you do. So but I like engagement or team engagement a little bit more as a term because it has a little bit more of a positive feel to it. Now, I'm going to assume that you sense the truth in this. Sort of employees who are engaged actually care a lot more. So employees who are engaged, who care for their company, they will care for each other, they will care for probably the customers that they're working for. So engagement means, oh yeah, going the extra mile, doing more, whatever. So, and that relates to not caring just in general, but about outcomes for the team, for customers, and for the enterprise or the organization. So figure that out. If only 15% of people are really engaged, so only 15% of people, or 16% in Denmark, really care about those things. Imagine that's 85% of untapped potential that we could address and trying to increase engagement in the company. That is a huge potential, sort of 85%. And that was, by the way, also shown by that research by the Gallup group, where they compared from all the companies that had high levels of engagement versus low levels of engagement. So the difference was, and you see the figures over there, in terms of what we just described, let's say customer metrics, customer satisfaction, and so on, or sales, right? Profitability, sales, benefits, something with finance, productivity, which might be a sort of metric too. So all those things were a lot higher with the highly engaged workforces versus the low engaged workforces. And highly engaged workforces mean that not just 15% was saying engaged, but up to 40, 50% or more were saying that we were engaged. In those companies, those metrics that we just talked about were a lot better. And on the other hand, absenteeism, turnover, meaning turnover of people leaving the company, safety incidents, and so on, quality was a lot better. So less people were leaving the company, less people were dissatisfied, burnouts, and so on, you know, all of the things. So that means, oh my God, engagement really has enormous potential. But unfortunately, like you showed in the word cloud, not too many companies would be focusing on that because people don't realize that there's a huge potential in there. So that's why I'm saying from those key value indicators at the highest level, the actual indication are you producing value or valuable outcomes, money, customers, and team? I would say focus on team engagement. Focus on team engagement completely, totally, almost like 100%. And in return, as almost a gift for creating a better environment for your people, as a gift, you will get more money and higher customer satisfaction. And don't forget that only 15% are really engaged. So the potential over there is great. And as Mads introduced me as an independent Scrum Caretaker, so I care a lot. And I care a lot about how Scrum is not only being used to produce better products, but also to create what I call a more humanized workplace. And that's the reason. Create a more humanized workplace so people feel more at home, feel better at home. And you will get a better company. Not just healthier for people, less burnouts, less turnover of people, higher satisfaction, higher monetary returns and so on, but also just a better company, a better place to live and to work. And we spend so much time at work. So additional questions that I have for you guys. So I think that this agile way of working or introducing Scrum, so becoming more agile via Scrum, but general terms, this agile way of working should be about helping people find their intrinsic motivation. That means increasing engagement. But it seems to be not happening too much. So what is in your experience, your view, your observation? What is the biggest impediment to, let's say, becoming more agile and creating an environment where people can actually engage more? So I need to open the voting. So what is in your view, observation, experience, the biggest impediment to agile? In your organization, the organizations that you work with, just in terms of, agile is not really being used to unlock, open up engagement.
And good, while people are voting, we have a number of questions related to value, but maybe we can take that afterwards. Yes. Right now, there's also questions related to engagement. So maybe we can take it after the voting here.
Yeah, okay, cool. Keeping an eye on the voting. So traditional burnouts, hierarchy, the organizations themselves, waterfall thinking, old ways of working that you can't get rid of, the top of management having a sort of almost very limited view on just money, on learning, lack of trust, mindset, culture, Agile but. Okay, let's take 10 more seconds to close this. A lot of things that pop out a little bit. Management, leadership, sort of the same mindset, probably a lot at that level, lack of trust. It often also refers to management, unfortunately, that they don't trust us. Okay, cool, thank you. It seems very realistic. And a lot of things I highly recognize. Now, in my view, what is, if I would have to sort of reduce it to one thing only, it would be this one. The biggest impediment to Agile is our ingrained obsession with controlling individuals. That old industrial mindset, you know, that sort of tailorist things, not trusting people, or in the other way around, we are obsessed by trying to control individuals. We think that is the job of management, of leadership, whatever, controlling individuals. And that is a huge impediment. And it's probably one of the most difficult ones to overcome. But the management shift that we're looking for, also expressed by that question that I shared at the sprint review, that was an indication of a management shift. The management shift that we're looking for is to stop managing for tasks and individual performance. I can't see how that in a complex environment, how that ever can be the role of management. Trying to manage tasks or full tasks and trying to control individual performance. The work that we do is way too complex, our environments are way too complex. That is plainly impossible. Still, a lot of people think that that is what they need to do. And that is then expressed or shown by going to the sprint review, wanting to know about velocity only, tasks, estimates, individuals having done or not having done the tasks, and so on. That is an expression of this. Where do you want to go for? In a simple word, we want to stop managing people and go for managing an environment. And that means creating and fostering an environment with boundaries within which people can engage. And boundaries is like looking at the fundamental unit in Scrum is a sprint, a team, and value. And then you want to manage via those boundaries. And you want to create an environment in which people can actually engage, like via self-organization, which should invoke the level of engagement and commitment of people, the ability to self-organize, organize your own work, and only show at the sprint review what you've done, how much value is in that, and also be respected for not being only judged for having that work and having to justify, but working with people that will help you think about how to do better. If that doesn't increase engagement, I don't know what will. So it's sort of helping people, managers, stakeholders, whatever, see that you have a lot of control in Scrum, but the control comes not from controlling the individuals, but managing boundaries. How much value has you produced? And then bringing feedback information on, oh, where is additional value? Where is even more value? That's sort of the summary of it thing. I've made it a little bit more, let's say, detailed. You know, what I see in a lot of organizations think that they can become more agile, whatever is in that word, by now transforming all their teams to be agile teams. And they all have to work on the same sprint length, 2 weeks. They all have to follow and apply the same practices. And it's sort of a very industrialized form of Scrum to start with. And it's only sort of at the team level. They think that it can be a more agile organization by just having all these agile teams in place. But on top of those teams, you've got all of the old command and control structures, deadlines being imposed, HR departments or resource managers and so on, pulling people from teams, putting them in other teams, so you have no dedicated teams. They have no team spaces. They all have to work in open offices, which doesn't help. They have Agile teams or Scrum teams being established in existing silos. So to avoid the problem of getting into conflict with team leads and department managers and so on. So you have all those little micro teams all working on little aspects of products, but nobody's minding the overall product in itself, let alone delivering value for that. And on top of that, so nobody's minding to reimagine and redefine structures around those teams. So I say more agile teams does not make a more agile organization. And in the Scrum world, we go back a lot to that old paper, 1986, it's called the New Product Development Game, where we got the term Scrum from, like team sports, team working together as a unit on the field. It's also why I called my new paper Moving Your Scrum Downfield, sort of reflecting that old idea, which I think is still very relevant and even very, very important. Even in that paper, they describe 6 key characteristics of what they call Scrum. All of those characteristics should be in our way of doing Scrum. But even in that paper, they already said that organizations will have to adopt a management style that promotes this new process, this new way of working. Just like we don't do in Scrum ourselves, they have also not described what that management style should be. But it boils down to the idea that you cannot properly implement Scrum without rethinking the organization around your Scrum teams and around your products. You just can't. But a lot of companies seem to be stuck at thinking they can. And then they introduce Scrum, they make all teams agile, they all work on two-week sprints, they industrialize Scrum to death, yeah, I can say that. Right? And after a while, a couple of years, they wake up thinking that all the while they have been increasing their agility, so that's what I call, but ending up finding that, oh my God, we have created something that I call an illusion of agility. And then it's a deflation by reality. It just falls flat on the ground again. Because they've done it with old school recipes. They've limited themselves to just teams. They now have all those isolated micro teams, not collaborating, not working together. Think again, they keep in place the huge disconnectedness. So, and what is then needed for me? So somebody needs to take care of revising the organization around those teams, looking at synergies across teams, merging teams, reforming teams to better serve the product and thereby increase your ability to deliver value. And by doing that spot after spot, hopefully certainly focused around products. So that's also one article in my book, 97 Things Every Scrum Practitioner Should Know, that Alan Gottesdiener has contributed, really thankful for that. I've answered this question, what is your product? And a lot of teams and Scrum practitioners will not be able to answer that question. A lot of organizations neither. And that is a pity, because you want to think about what is my product, so that you can think about what will we call done, what will we be calling releasable, but also what will we be calling valuable. So there's a lot of things flowing from the idea of identifying, defining your product. Yeah? But at least you want to sort of revise your organization, project or product after product after product, so that you slowly grow into a networked organization, which is a flexible, and that's in that sense, agile organization. It can be adapted. You want to create product hubs, and around the product hub, maybe in the beginning, it will only be Scrum teams, but at some point in time, you want to include product management people in your hub as well, organized as Scrum teams or not. But you want to create product hubs. And a hub might grow as your product grows. It might shrink or disappear as your product shrinks or disappears. You might have people moving from one product hub to another one, depending on situations. So this is a very flexible structure, where the old school hierarchical structure is rigid, which is the antithesis of agile or agility. It is not adaptive. It is fixed, it is rigid. A network organization will still have some form of leadership, but a lot of distributed leadership too. So it's not just hierarchical leadership. There's a lot of managing happening in that sort of structure, and it's based around some sort of purpose, which I like to be value for a purpose, valuable outcomes. So, and that's a move that is not going to happen overnight, but it's neither going to be a sort of top-down or bottom-up thing in that pyramid structure. It's just picking a product and then consolidating people, skills, expertise, tools, authorizations around a product, one product at a time. So you have a little bit of a networked organization within the pyramid, and then the next part of the pyramid. And ultimately, you will have removed the pyramid. And all against the goal, the ambition to create a agile, meaning adaptive organization, meaning adaptable, flexible organizational structures. Yeah, and then each product hub, and this goes back, so the statements over there go back even to the new product development game. So they didn't say how management should look like, how an organization should look like. They did describe how management should behave. And I think that's a truly important one. So a product hub, as a Scrum team already, you can see this even, is an ecosystem. Meaning an ecosystem, it has boundaries. It will adapt its external form and shape towards the organization, everything that's happening around your ecosystem, but also within your ecosystem, you will see changes. And an ecosystem for me in Scrum means it's focused on a product. And again, that can be a digital service, a physical product, a digital product. So think about it. And around your valuable product, you have lots of things. You have people performing according to certain roles. You're minding your consumers. It's based upon self-organization, cross-functional abilities to deliver value. It needs a workspace. Again, open office is not a great workspace. You can never build an ecosystem within an open office. It needs its own workspace. You will need tools and so on. It needs, I like that thing a lot, amicability. No, that's very important. But what is more important, that is based upon those ideas of the new product development game, a product hub, that sort of ecosystem, is able to operate like you would operate like a startup. They set their own agenda, they take their own initiatives, all within boundaries, strategies, objectives, whatever, goals, large things from the organization. So, but within those boundaries, they all set their own agenda. And management, they act more like, it obviously said venture capitalism, but I like the idea of investors a little bit more. Venture capitalists is sort of aggressive. Too aggressive for me as a small, gentle Belgian guy. So acting as investors, working on the boundaries, controlling risk from the boundaries, inspections at sprint reviews and so on, but certainly not intervening on a daily basis. Leave those teams be. Go to the sprint reviews if you're invited by the product owner. For the rest, guide them, give them money so that they can do their job, and give them moral support. In that sense, trust them. But trust is not without limitations. It's you trust them to do a good job within the sprint, and you go to the sprint review to check out what have you been doing, how valuable is that, and what can I do to help you deliver more value. Well, stop intervening in our sprints might be the answer. Stop pulling the best people from our team all the time. Might be something very important adaptation. But this is for me very important.
Gunther,
Yes.
there's a lot of questions here. Maybe
Yes,
we should
I see a lot of
just pick two of the questions related to the network organization.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Let's do that. By the way, I'm at the end of my thing anyhow. That was sort of the message anyhow. So good thing. Yes. Go ahead, Matt. Yes.
So I'm just picking two questions related to this specific topic. One from Torben. Is there a mismatch between the network organization and the aim for stable teams?
Okay. I'm going to open up the window myself. Okay, sorry, Mads. Say again.
So one from Torben here. Is there a mismatch between the networked organization and the aim for stable teams?
A mismatch. Well, I believe a network organization will at least invoke or inspire or invite stable and dedicated teams a lot more, because you start from your product and you organize sort of ecosystem around your product, and that ecosystem should be as stable as possible. Otherwise, you insert instability yourself into this. But maybe even if you're not working product hubs already, you can still work with value and indicators of value, even in your current setup of Scrum, and work around value and indicators of value at the sprint review, and help stakeholders see that in order to have more value, we need more stable teams. So that might be a way to use metrics or indicators towards management, sort of language of management, to help them see that, oh, please stay away from our teams. So, and for me, a networked organization like this with product hubs that are networked to each other, that's an invitation for stability and stable teams.
Maybe just one more question before you continue, also related to this and make it maybe more understandable. One from Leise. Would you consider self-management, I don't mean self-organization, should be part of a networked organization?
Yeah, but to go into those terms a little bit, I haven't included it here, but I've got this sort of view over, sort of view created over what do you mean with self-organization. And you know what, we're just in this very dynamic online situation anyhow. Let me pull up the geographic for you guys anyhow.
I think I know which graphic you're going to pull up.
Yes, I would hope you do. Let me see if I can.
Because I've done a lot of teaching around that one.
Oh, okay, cool.
But maybe it's another one.
Yeah, I'm in a situation currently. I've been doing so much stuff lately that I have to clean up my pictures a lot.
And while Gunther is searching for his graphic, please go to the Q&A module and upvote questions, because I have a feeling that we soon are going to cover the different questions, and it will be easier just to take them from the top. So you upvote them by voting on them, and then we can start from the top. And if you have a question that you think is already answered, then just write it into a comment related to the question.
So this is, I think, the picture that you were hoping for, Mads, I hope at least. So just to come back to the question. So Scrum is a lot about self-organization. In my paper, I've described it as one of the two essential aspects of Scrum's DNA. So Scrum's DNA for me is self-organization and empiricism. The combination of that, that's Scrum's DNA. Now, self-organization in English is a rather undefined term. I've elaborated on that in my paper a lot, but it leaves it open a little bit to how would you define self-organization. And what I want to represent with this picture is that a manager-led situation, or a main technical lead, senior team member, whatever, one person saying all the time to a whole team or several teams who should be working on what at what point in time, that at least is not self-organization. You could just stop doing Scrum. Scrum was not built for that. Scrum will not deliver any benefits in that sort of manager-led situation. So Scrum, and that's why your term triggered this with me, the idea of self-managing, is sort of the minimal level of self-organization that for me you want to achieve with Scrum. Self-managing meaning a team, development team with a product and a Scrum Master, but the development team managing its own work in a sprint against the goal of delivering as much value as possible by the end of the sprint in the form of increments, which is a tangible output. Yeah? So you want to get as much outcome in your output as possible. That is self-management, and that is what I just described as managers not intervening in a sprint. That is the minimal level of self-management. Now, what I found as a huge problem with most organizations I've seen, certainly the larger one, is what I call a lack of team stability. Meaning at some point in time, a team becomes like really well-oiled. They gel, they know each other almost inside out, they know private things from each other nobody else wants to know. Whatever, they become really gelled, they become, in old school terms, high performer. In my terms, highly collaborative. They really collaborate intensely and greatly together. Now, a lack of team stability means that a resource manager, a project manager, the PMO, the managers, whatever, they think that they know better who should be working in what team at what point in time. So they regularly pull out people from a well-oiled team to bring them another team that is highly disruptive, and it almost kills a lot of the team dynamics that they've built up. So in my experience from the teams I've worked with, even the ones that were like really gelling, becoming high performant, they just fell flat again just by people pulling out team members all the time. Now, if we leave that decision with the team themselves, if we accept that people can manage their own work within a sprint, for me, that means automatically that we also accept that those people can indicate that they need more skills, less skills, more certain experience, and so on. They become self-designing. So self-managing means they do all of the work that they have to do within a sprint. Beyond that, they can also decide who should be in or out of the team in order, again, against those boundaries, those goals of Scrum, be able to produce as much value as possible. And it's also, not to make this sort of word games, but sort of the ultimate thing is that a self-organizing entity, might be a Scrum team, might be a product hub, becomes totally self-directing, meaning setting their own directions, their own strategies, their own bigger roads, their own larger objectives, and so on. And in between, there's a lot of openness on what you can grow towards, allowing the team, other teams to decide for themselves. Well, sort of, is that helpful in understanding of this?
I think it's helpful, yes. And this was also some more words, an extended version of also of this visualization, also in the PSM material. That's great.
Yeah, but it all boils down to the fact that, do you trust that people can organize their own work and what aspects of their own work? Given that you have control via the fact that it's only for 2 weeks work, there's an inspections regularly following, you don't have to like that ingrained obsession with controlling individuals.
Yeah. Great. We have a number of questions, and also Henning went in and said that his question was already answered. That's great. And so let's start from the, are you done, by the way?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Let's start from the top. One question from Daniel. How can you measure team engagement? And then a comment from Kristen. Please, with concrete examples, if you can.
Yeah, I've got the window open over here. So the last thing I did with the company I worked with, at least with a number of teams, I've tried to, so team engagement is something for the team themselves to mention or assess or whatever you want to call it. And where would you do that? In Scrum? At a sprint retrospective. You've got an opportunity. So for me, the sprint retrospective, I get that question regularly. Yeah, we've got all these boring retrospectives. What should we do about it? It's like, how can a sprint retrospective be boring looking at what you're doing? So sprint retrospective should be at least around 2 topics. And maybe I can point out to, there's a fishbone over there in the back of my office. I created that at some point in time. sort of a Scrum fishbone. Because at the highest level, for me, a sprint retrospective should be about 2 topics at least. One of them is, did we create a releasable, valuable increment? If yes, what can we do better even next time, whatever? If no, what do we need to actually move towards that? And the second one is, how do we feel as a team? What is our engagement as a team? And one tool I introduced, so you can have that in a fishbowl. So one of the fish things is about engagement. So it's about value, goals, and so on. Done less. One of the things about engagement, so you can use a fishbone to ask team members about their level of engagement. The last sort of self-invented tool that I try to use with teams is, I made a parallel analogy with, sometimes I go out running, running around here. It's been a while. I don't do it too often anymore. But I'm very old. I've got bad body and so on. So I don't do it too often. But I have this beautiful thing, this watch that I can use during running. And after my run, I get this beautiful graph of my heart rate and other parameters throughout sort of the 5 kilometers that I run. So, and I've tried to help teams make up sort of their sort of tension, heart rate as a team. So by the end of the sprint, at the sprint retrospective as a team, try to indicate some sort of overall level of engagement, of more like stress and tension that you were feeling. And I've tried to make it a sort of barometer of stress and tension. When I worked with them and we identified sort of 3 areas, sort of not enough stress, too much stress. And the idea was that over a number of retrospectives, they would capture that. And that would be sort of the summary of all team members. So team members would do that individually, then bring it together as a team. And then again, it's like with all those tools, it's all an invitation for a conversation. So individual team members and so on, and then capture that, and over a number of sprint retrospectives, see that, how is that evolving? Sort of in line with my heart rate when I do a 5 kilometer run. Sometimes you see strange evolutions, that tension over sprints is rising, it's going up to unhealthy levels. But sometimes you end up with like very low levels of tension, stress, and engagement, which means you might actually end up in that sort of middle area of those engagement people, like passive, who cares? So that was one tool that I worked with teams. But at least at the retrospective, from the team, all team members, and then try to come up with some sort of overall level of team engagement. And again, it's about the conversation and it's about possible adaptations. What are we going to do about this? Did we feel comfortable? No. If we keep doing it like this, I'm going to burn out. That's not the idea. I don't feel engaged. So what can we do to help you find your intrinsic motivation? So it was sort of the barometer, and then a number of points so that you can see an evolution.
I think this is also a topic that we could easily dive into and use the next half an hour just talk about this. But we still have 14 questions in the queue, so I will try to resist and not go in here, even though I can feel that it's a little bit hard because there's a lot of interesting areas here. And if you're not part of the Scrum team, then how do you feel it? How do you do it as a manager and so on? Well, let's move to the next question from Klaus.
Yeah.
Engagement. That's a little bit introduction here. Is it fair to expect that colleagues are engaged or interested at least in financial impacts of their work? Do you think it's possible to change the minds of people that just work for their paycheck? Is it a hiring problem? Hiring the right people, or is it also a long journey of persuading people?
Yeah, well, the difficulty with that is, Klaus, it's a good question, that is it fair to expect that? Yes, that is fair to expect that, but you cannot enforce that. It's like what I say, a lot has to do with intrinsic motivation, and what I always say, I can't give you intrinsic motivation. I can't plug in a USB cable into your head and download some intrinsic motivation, because that's intrinsic motivation. What you can do at most is foster an environment that invites people to find their intrinsic motivation again, come to home, engage again with energy, loving what they do. If in the end they don't find that energy again, then count on the self-designing capability of people to sort of say, hey, this is not fun. We always have to sort of drag you along. So yes, it is fair to expect that colleagues are engaged or interested, but you can't enforce that. What you can do is try to create an environment where maybe as a manager, you could honestly say, hey, I've done everything. I'm not interfering. I'm not intervening. I'm going to sprint reviews. I'm trying to help. I'm trying to facilitate. I am managing the environment. And for whatever reason, intrinsic motivation is not rising, engagement is not rising, then you might want to have a look at what might be happening. And count on, there's always some people that will stand up and try to do something about it. So is it about hiring the right people? It's my true belief that every single human person has the ability to self-organize. So I often love managers. I like to provoke managers a little bit to think about what are you doing, or what is happening in your organization, what is happening in your environment that limits, that impedes, that blocks people to use their natural ability to self-organize. And that's a more fascinating question.
Interesting that the same people can self-organize outside the company,
Yes.
maybe not inside the company.
The 70% of people that go home as quickly as possible in the evening, then they go to do stuff for themselves, they organize themselves, they take lessons, they do whatever, so they can't actually do that. So we have to think, what are we doing in our professional environments that blocks people from using that ability? And then try to guide it with boundaries, working in sprints. And in the end, Klaus, honestly, if you have created such an environment and people are not truly interested in the product that they're building or the service that they're delivering, whatever, then they are probably in the wrong place. And then you have a self-designing ecosystem to sort of try to deal with that.
Great. So let's take the next one. And we just got a question from Thomas popping up to the top. So please use the upvote because I will respect that. So from Thomas, and then Alan go up. But let's do the Thomas now.
Yeah.
How do you convince the C-level that they should stop doing CNC and distributed leadership and create network organization?
Yeah. It's sort of the same problem as just before that. I'm maybe I'm in a comfortable position. I don't know. I don't know. But I've stopped trying to convince people. What I can do with whenever I work with C-level people, executive teams, I always, at least in the beginning, stay away from anything with Scrum, roles, artifacts, whatever, technicalities, and always try to go back on why are we here? Why did you invite me? What are your biggest problems? What are the struggles? What are you hoping for? So at least, and I don't engage with the company if I don't feel that there's a real sense of urgency, some sort of what I call seriousness. They have to be serious about this thing called Scrum. And that seriousness is often expressed by the fact that they can really highlight what are they hoping for? What are the problems that they're struggling with? Why are we here? Sort of start with your why. And then I can try to build up to depicting Scrum as a way to deal with those problems. So that's, I cannot convince people. I can help them find their problems, but I want to be sort of sure that they actually acknowledge that there is a problem. Because I know from experience that Scrum, you cannot do Scrum properly with the hoped for results without changing the organization. So that is a difficult road ahead of us. And I want to feel that they know that they have some sort of drive, some sort of motivation. So I cannot convince people. And it reminds me a little bit to one of the most difficult times I had probably. So I started this thing, Scrum, with extreme programming a long time ago, back in 2003. great results, success, happy customers, really engaged people, amazing. We did extreme programming all the way, everything, and without me having to do much. That's how it felt. That was in 2003, and in 2007 there were some changes in my professional life, and I suddenly got to work with other people, other contexts, other teams, and other environments, and so on. And suddenly they were asking about a lot of those things. And then I realized, oh my God, this is 3-4 years now that I never had to explain this. And the fact that you have to make it explicit, why you did this driven development, why team atmosphere was so important, why you went out to have joint lunches and pizzas and whatever, and funny things and so on, that you suddenly had to explain that in itself already reduced the impact and the value of what you were doing. And actually, if I have to convince people why quality is important, why test-driven development is important, why working as a team, why picking up work from each other is important, that is already a step that, oh my God, so that was in, and that is still happening a lot. So if people sort of don't almost intuitively get a lot of the value, be prepared for a very difficult road ahead.
Yeah, I think it's also about different mental models of how do you see and understand different aspects, and not just building a new one, but also changing existing one.
Yes.
Yeah. So we still have about 22 minutes left for the allocated 2 hours time, and still having a number of questions. One from Jakob here. Is most companies' salary is based in individual performance given by the management.
Yeah.
How would a solid concrete advice sound in order to change this, given the fact that most people just turn up in order to get paid?
Yeah. I'm very try to be very modest and humble, whatever, to try to bring at the same time a radical message to companies, and at the same time in practice to sort of take it step by step by step. There is more and more research indicating that the way that individual performance management and performance assessments and reviews are not just not working, but are actually counterproductive. So more and more huge companies are abandoning traditional rewarding strategies, which is a good thing. There should be at least something with a team component. Team contribution, there should be some shares at teams and so on. So it's not my specialty. What I like to do with teams and HR people sit together and think it through. But this way of working with Scrum, if you would have a product hub, so a hub, an ecosystem around a product, and you've got all those team people there, how are you going to reward people? Now, there's been research, and probably everybody, or most people know about Daniel Pink. He also said that in a way, and that's basically what you need to have some sort of salary, payment, whatever rewarding strategy in place that feels honest and fair to people, so that money is not a topic anymore and they focus on the real work at hand. The problem is that we thought we can replace intrinsic motivation with extrinsic motivation, money, bonuses, incentives. And a lot of the strategies are still focused on extrinsic motivations, but it's not an equivalent of intrinsic motivation. Create an environment where people are happy, make sure that they are paid properly, decently, and fairly, so that they don't run off to the competitor, and then they will find their engagement again. But it's not the industrial model of controlling individuals. The carrot and sticks. The carrot in this case would be the intrinsic motivator, but that becomes a drug, becomes an addiction. So move away from that, or even abandon it completely.
And maybe even all the changes that is happening around the world maybe can foster a little bit more in this direction.
Yeah.
Maybe. One question
but it does mean, sorry to interrupt, yeah. It does mean that as a Scrum Master, a coach, whatever, you want to be working also with HR people to think about the current strategies and how they are aligned, or probably how they are at odds with this Scrum way of working. Complexity, working as a team, delivering value rather than living up to your estimates. And then HR people are smart people. They will help you think this through.
Yeah. I have worked, just during the last month, I have worked with HR people in 2 different companies. So I see this also happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. One question from Torben here. How do you see Generation Z and their lack of need for physical presence in context of working together on complex work as a team? So all those young new people being online all the time.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm not a fan of all these sort of categorizations. Generation, whatever, I don't know what generation, maybe I'm from the boomers also, I have no idea. And I never minded those things anyhow. I've seen as much flexibility, responsiveness, eagerness, dynamism with old people as with young people, or lack of dynamism with old people or with young people. So I'm not a huge fan of all those categorizations of generations and so on. Regardless, whatever age, generation, people can self-organize, and that human aspect that I talked about with that one article, working from home, that is a human thing, has to do with our brain, the way that we are wired, and that is independent of people's age. We are social creatures. We desperately need contact, emotionally, physically. We need to be able to, that's how we build up self-esteem. And remote working is a possible alternative in some situations, but certainly not all the time.
Great. We have 17 minutes and still 10 questions. One from Olav here. It's a bit like the hen and egg, right? In order for self-directing team to work, they need to be highly engaged. But for them to be highly engaged, they need to experience to be self-directing. So where to start? What comes first?
Yeah, nothing comes first. It's a bit of the problem. It's a sort of a false dichotomy. It's not black and white. It's like sort of, sometimes people ask, yeah, you know what, Scrum now has also those values. What comes first, the Scrum values or the practices, how to do Scrum? And they go hand in hand. And sometimes you focus more on the values and you focus again on the practices. So values in Scrum is about behavior, and self-organization is also about behavior. They go hand in hand. They reinforce each other. Sometimes you do more on the one, sometimes you do one a bit more on the other side. So it's not first this and then we can do the other one. Do a little bit of that, do the other one, and see how they influence each other, and just move iterative, incremental. It's how we live our lives too. Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe some area is more important right now, and then we need to do something in another area.
Yeah, and in the beginning, you might want to focus on just doing Scrum, following the rules, maybe a little bit reluctantly, because you don't get it yet, you don't feel it, it's not your intuition, it's not how you feel work should be doing. So it might be good to be a little bit rigid in that sense about being just following the rules until you really get it and you get to play with it, and then you can focus again. And every sprint, by the end of every 2 or 3 weeks, you have a retrospective to look back at that. I can't stress the importance enough. Every 2 to 3 weeks, you have a point where you can look back at that. How is this working for us? How is that working for us? And sometimes you focus more on the practices, sometimes you're more on the values, sometimes you go hand in hand, sometimes you do the practices differently by being reminded of the values again. You know, oh yeah, this is focus, this is commitment, this is why we do it. Oh yeah, that's right, I want. So try to not think too black and white or one or the other.
Yes, and there's a question about if we are going to get the recording. Yes, I will get the recording and download it and convert it and put it out online, hopefully during the next week or two. Let's see how big it is. So now we're getting back to some questions about value. We have one from Nils here. Value can be created when the product is well managed by the PO, but the value can be more valuable when processes in the company are adjusted to. Gunther, for product management, the Lean Startup is one of the books. Can you recommend some books, frameworks, etc. for change management?
Yeah, my book, like I explained with the agility path, we try to introduce the idea of Scrum for managers and changing the organization. But the way you do Scrum for change, because change is highly complex, the way you want to use Scrum, it has to be, and that's difficult, it has to be connected to the Scrum that the teams are doing. So from the sprint retrospective, the sprint reviews, from the Scrum Masters, there should be some connection to management, whatever you use in Scrum. And that might be at the sprint review, looking at those key value indicators. That integrates it a lot. But from the inspection of those key value indicators, managers, stakeholders should work with the product owner, but more even with the Scrum Masters on, okay, how can we help your teams increase their ability to deliver value? What is happening? What impediments are going on? So for me, it's Scrum, and Scrum in its most essential form, working in sprints of 2 weeks, can easily be done to imply things like the Lean Startup, that you refer to. What is the most difficult thing for this is that it starts, like your question indicates, it starts with a product owner, and therefore it starts with a product. So even if you want to do something like Lean Startup, it's about sort of product ideas. It's not just work all over the place. It has to have some focus. So you need a clearly defined product with a product owner that has a mandate, who can act as a sort of what I call product CEO over the product. And then you need to have one or more Scrum teams working on that product, hopefully dedicated. And then you can start applying those things like ideas from the Lean Startup. You can move to minimal viable products, which can be one sprint work, which can a couple of sprints can be combined into an MVP. So all of the thinking from the Lean Startup can be implemented by using Scrum underlying that.
So for change management here, it's also about using Scrum and the ideas.
Yes. And the one of the things that I've also noticed in what I call the illusion of agility, don't set up separate change projects. Change should be on the floor, on the work floor. Change is in how the teams work. So change is in every team, trying out stuff in every sprint. So don't set up a separate change program. No, make sure that change is happening on the work floor.
So we have 11 minutes and 7 questions, and please upvote if you think one question is important to cover here. We have the next one from Asim. Isn't the self-organizing teams and or the new organization set up based on the foundation of trust? How to motivate the management to trust their team members and not just take decisions for them?
Yeah, again, you cannot make people trust somebody. Trust is something that you grow. You grow trust. And in a Scrum situation, trust goes 2 ways. It's from teams to the management, from the management to the teams. Yeah, and by trying to do Scrum and having management stakeholders at the sprint review, maybe they will grow their trust in the team, that they're able to do their work themselves. Sometimes maybe they fail by, oh damn, I intervened again, I disrupted again, whatever, and then hopefully you have a courageous team that has the trust in management that you're able to actually say that at the sprint review. That was not helpful. So maybe they should grow trust. Again, trust is not something that you can give to people. It's not in a contract, it's not in a paper. It needs to grow. And hopefully by doing Scrum, people start trusting each other more and more and more. And maybe by the next release of the product, trust is so high that people don't have to justify again what they used to justify for in the past. What I noticed and I think in my book I called it upstream adoption. It's a huge challenge for the future of Scrum. getting managers and stakeholders to see the value of Scrum, which means mostly getting to see that you have a lot of control in Scrum by looking at the boundaries only. Again, that biggest impediment are ingrained obsession with controlling individuals. And you have to grow sort of out of that slowly, step by step by step. There's an important role for Scrum Masters there.
Very important. So let's see if we can cover most of the questions. We have one from Thomas. What is needed to get more companies to be open, understand the value of a Scrum Master, also serving the organization and not only being a team coach? What can I do?
Yeah, I don't know how that is in Denmark, Thomas. I know you're from Denmark, right? But what I've seen certainly in the Netherlands, not so much in Belgium, over let's say the past 5-6 years. So in the beginning there was suddenly a movement that Scrum Masters were not important anymore. They were eliminated. It was sort of a side job for somebody from the team. A lot of organizations went for sort of the newest type, which was often DevOps. So you have IT managers or CIOs trying to control stuff. And they wanted, their definition of Agile was DevOps, and that felt like, okay, now a DevOps team member, if he or she has some time left, he can also do some Scrum Master work. And again, it's like with the illusion of agility, deflation by reality, it takes a while, but after a while they see that a number of problems are not being addressed anymore. And they come up to classes with me or my coaching, whatever. Yeah, what about this? And then the funny thing is that you can sort of throw that back. Oh, cool. We have a role for that in Scrum. Oh yeah, that's right, Scrum Master. Yeah, but no, we don't do that anymore, because in the end, people that have to do Scrum Master sort of next to their actual job, that by default means that they never do it, because there's always something more important. And it sometimes takes a while before companies wake up, finding out that a lot of things are not being addressed anymore. So that is actually a very difficult one. Last week I read some articles for my book. There's one from a German coach I know, Markus Reitner. He's working with a large company, certainly with BMW. And he made a really beautiful article. He called it the court jester at the touchline. Also the idea, it's in the article, how many Scrum Masters are invited or pushed towards doing real work. Meaning in sports terms, they are pushed onto the field and they have to play with the team, which means there's nobody overlooking, nobody helping, and so on. And it requires quite some courageous Scrum Masters to resist that. But what I see happening in the Netherlands right now, over the past 1 or 2 years, there's a revived interest in the Scrum Master role. I see it in my trainings, I see it in my coaching, so people are rediscovering, organizations rediscovering the importance of a Scrum Master. So sometimes you have to sort of let go and let it happen. You can't convince, enforce those things. You can be, like I do, you can cry over it, but that's about it sometimes.
Yeah. I see the same in Denmark. Same trend is also happening, especially in companies that have been using Scrum for some time. And now see a need for actually have the services also from Scrum Masters. So one question here from Jonas. How do you handle engagement or improve engagement when all in the team are contractors or people from outside the company?
Yeah. Well, Jonas, my sort of intuitive answer would be, sometimes it is what it is, and you use Scrum to get the most out of your situation, knowing that it could have been so much more if only. Try to not burn yourself with the if only. Sometimes it is what it is, and you try, at least you can use Scrum to get the maximum out of your situation, within your constraints. So that might be a huge limitation to engagement. You can try to raise that, surface that, put it on the table, get management organizations to think about it, and sometimes they will not just believe you or go for it. And then it's a matter of being able to look yourself in the mirror in the morning and find for yourself, I'm doing whatever I can without getting burned up by frustration and so on, and without getting fired by pushing the organization to become better. So there's no magical solution for that. Sometimes you just accept it for what it is, try to make the best out of it. Sometimes you get frustrated, and in the end you might just leave. But sometimes you want to change the situation, and sometimes you just want to get the max out of what you do.
Yeah. So almost a yes/no question, or you can answer yes/no to the next one. Would you call a vision a product?
No. A product has a vision. A vision in itself is not necessarily a product. Might be, but it's better to sort of turn it around and start with product and have a vision for your product. And just Lisa, your question remind me a little bit. So a little bit back, somebody read it. I wrote this paper. It's called "Moving Your Scrum Downfield." And Mads, can I use the last couple of minutes that we have for just to read a little part from the paper I wrote? It's called "Moving Your Scrum Downfield," and the subtitle is 6 Essential Traits of the Game. So it's not just about the rules of the game; it's about sort of the traits that should be characteristics of the way you play the game. And when I describe the roles, I'm growing into a situation that I don't use the term role anymore because it invokes the wrong feelings. I try to consciously and consistently describe it as accountability. And in that chapter, one of the traits, one of the 6, I described as players demonstrate accountability. As part of the product owner, I've written the following, and I hope that may help you. Product is the vehicle for a product owner to deliver value. A product is a tangible or non-tangible good or service, or can be or is more abstract, like the outcome of a certain process, certain processes or actions. So product in English is not just a good or a service, it can also be the product of something. So, but make it more tangible at least. But I said without a clearly identified product, including known consumers and stakeholders, but without that, a product owner can hardly be effective in optimizing for value delivered. And as a result, Scrum is hardly used effectively. So without defining your product, it's going to be a hell of a job. You might as well stop doing Scrum. Anyway, don't do that, but still. And I also described that a product owner, self-evidently in my paper, not in practice, self-evidently minding the long-term viability of the product leads through a product vision. That's a simple statement. It's my reflection of the fact that product owner is actually a servant leader. Providing servant because you don't have control of the people, leading by providing a vision, a road ahead. Where are we heading for? And a product vision captures why the product exists. So it starts with product, and then why does the product exist? If you can't explain why your product exists, how are you going to motivate and inspire people? Why are you actually spending money on it? Why would you be investing on it? So a product vision encapsulates what makes the product worthwhile buying, consuming, and investing in. From a product vision, you might uncover specific goals, product functions that you want to deliver, functionality, solutions, and so on, and validate whether value is actually being created via product increments. So if you think about value at the sprint review, you might assess that versus to compare that to the product vision. How has this sprint brought us closer to your product vision? So the funny thing is, start with product, make sure you have a vision, and you know what? Your product backlog will follow from your vision and not the other way around.
Not the other way around, yes. So that was a short answer, a short question and a long answer. Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I think it's 5 o'clock, but we still have a couple of questions. I think if you have the time, then we could maybe go through some of them, and then people can also watch the recording if they have to pick up kids or make food. And one of the first questions, I think, for this webinar from Anne was this curious question about what made you choose your own way? What are the benefits?
Well, when I started, I explained I wanted to go my own way. So I've been in several situations, several companies, a lot of consulting until 2013. So I discovered Scrum and extreme programming, which is quite important, by the way, back in 2003. And I know I totally loved it. And since then, I have not spent one day of my, and unfortunately not just my professional life, but also probably not my personal life, I have not spent one day not thinking about Scrum. Until 2013, I've done consulting for 10 years, so 23 to 2013, lots of circumstances. From 2010, I've worked with large organizations like at the first Agile steps of ING in the Netherlands, other banks. I've worked with plenty of things. And then I got the chance to work together with Ken Schwaber and Scrum Talk for 3 years, where I got to work with people like Mads, which is great. But then after 3 years, I missed being out there too much. And talking about the lean startup or entrepreneurship, I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm a scared guy. I'm whatever. But it seems there's something in me that makes me push myself towards whatever things. And back in 2016, when I decided to stop working exclusively with only Scrum Talk, I made a conscious decision to not work for a company, because when I made my decision public that I was leaving Scrum Talk or not working exclusively anymore, I got some beautiful job offers. And then I realized it was very tempting for a very scared person like me. And then I realized those job offers, they all play on sort of status, ego, job titles, importance. And I know that when I left Capgemini in 2013, I had a beautiful title and I couldn't care less about titles. It was like, no, let's not do that. Let's really be this little one-person company with the ambition of using Scrum to not just build great products, but moreover, create humanized workplaces that will result in better products. Because I felt that in the Scrum communities, we are overly focused on the technical aspects of Scrum. So that's what helped me go my own way. Is it working out? Yes. Until like 2 months ago, suddenly my agenda was empty, which is not so funny because it means I have no revenues. But you know what? We'll see in the fall. Hopefully coming to Denmark together with Mads and
hopefully coming to Denmark and teaching your first class in Denmark ever. So we have scheduled one in September. Yeah. Then we have 2 questions related to public sector. I think it was related to when we talked about value in the beginning. In the public sector, is it more difficult to pinpoint value? And do we have examples of value in that sector?
It's slightly more difficult. It sort of depends. Also in the public sector, you always have consumers of your services and products. So thinking about what is the product, often in terms of the service you're trying to deliver, and then think about what are our consumers. It's less about the financial returns or benefits or profits, but you can easily replace that with, I don't know, benefits to society, some larger things. There will always be benefits to the organization. So think about it creatively. With regards to the survey I shared, I don't know it by heart, but I do know that they make the distinction between self-employed people working for large companies, and I'm pretty sure also for people in the public sector. So the figures that I have shown are indeed sort of the averages for countries and regions. I don't know by heart anymore what the distinction was between public and private. But I unfortunately, I must agree, certainly in Belgium, I don't know about Danish government, but in Belgium, I'm gonna be honest, government is a very difficult place for me to work in. Some of my, some of my worst experiences were over there. Because not thinking in terms of value, satisfaction, very political, very job protectionist types of things, very difficult for me to get.
I have experienced the public sector in Denmark be more open. So I also do work with different areas of the public sector. There's one more from Pia about the public sector. Has there been a separation of public and private people in the survey? I think was the statistic from Gallup.
Yeah, so I saw that question, so that's why I already answered it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great.
So there is a distinction in the paper. I don't know by heart how it is.
Yeah. And then we have the final question from Torben. One more question from Torben. Can well-outlet agile leadership, so really well-performed or mature agile leadership, because Scrum Master are not needed anymore?
No. I'll explain why. Again, it reminds me again of my paper. So I wrote in my paper again about players demonstrating accountability. As the last paragraph, Torben, of the Scrum Master little chapter, I said Scrum Master accountability cannot be eliminated. As complex work, turbulent circumstances, and changing environments inevitably give rise to situations and challenges for which players need support, guidance, and coaching. Scrum Masters can only strive to become invisibly present. Now, with regards to your question, there's also a yes answer to your question, because if Agile leadership gets the idea of Scrum really well, they will be the Scrum Master. They will, that's why I call it accountability. They will enact the accountability of Scrum Master. They might not call themselves Scrum Master, but it's actually accountability. And it reminds me a little bit of a question I had yesterday by a friend of mine in the US, sort of going in the same direction with Scrum coaches, Scrum Masters, and leadership and so on. And he talked about sort of the ideally agile company. It's sort of the same question, would you still have Scrum Masters? And I said, yes, and I'll even make it worse. If your company is truly agile, implementing on the agile mindset in the Agile manifesto and understanding Scrum, you would have at least the combination of product owner accountability and Scrum Master accountability almost at every level or at every hub, but even at every level. And to give you an extreme example, you might have a CEO of a company, so the big boss, the chief executive officer of the company. If the chief executive officer of the company understands Scrum and agility well, that chief executive officer would act either as a product owner, meaning he or she would need a Scrum Master next to him, not on top, not lower, at a peer level, to help him or her out on how to facilitate things, how to understand self-organization, time box work, and so on, drive forward from a vision for the company now. Or if that CEO is more like the executive, meaning executing on the instructions from shareholders and owners and so on, or investors, then it might be acting as a Scrum Master. But that means that he or she would need a product owner next to him. So you would have more Scrum Masters.
Yeah.
And that is, for me, Agile leadership. And I think there's also an article in my book about it by two German guys that said Scrum is Agile leadership. The three accountabilities, that is Agile leadership. If people that understand Scrum, you would have that sort of implementation of Agile leadership at multiple points and multiple levels. Yeah.
Great. And maybe this should be the closing sentence of this session. We already spent more than 2 hours and still have 40 people here. So thank you, Gunther, for participating in this webinar. It's been great. We have touched a lot of topics that I also could have a feeling of diving much more into. So I think we could easily use 2 more hours or 4 hours.
It's so fascinating. I'm always going to these things scared, and I always prepare too much material, thinking I don't have enough to say, and we still always have not enough time.
Yeah, and thank you for all for coming here, and take care in Belgium, and hope you everything will be okay, and see you soon, and both in Denmark and in other events.
Okay, great. So thank you all, and thank you all
thank you for coming here.
Amazing to have so many people. So thank you, Mads, and we'll stay in touch, and hopefully I can come to Denmark. I really look forward to that.
Yeah, both for the class together and also for a Scrum Day session in the future. Yeah, great. Thank you for now, and thank you all of you, and have a great evening.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
bye.